Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to an order. Roll call.
Mr. Dangler,
He's going to be a little late.
you got it. Dr. Vogt,
Here.
Mrs. Wittes,
Here.
Dr. Selly,
Here.
and Mr. Vieira.
Here.
I hereby certify that this meeting has been published in the newspaper and adequate electronic notice has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act and New Jersey Administrative Code Title V, Chapter 39, Section 1.5, Notice of the Remote Public Meeting as required by law.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with the Stormwater Management Ordinance. Laura Newman. Laura, it's all yours.
Thank you, Council President. So essentially, as the council may be aware, the DEP had proposed amendments to the stormwater management rules. Those were formally adopted in March of 2020, and the adoption of those rules gave municipalities 1 year to update their ordinances in accordance with their municipal stormwater permit. Currently, the city of Long Branch has a stormwater section. It's codified in Chapter 300 of our code. And essentially what I've done is taken the DEP model ordinance and I've highlighted where those changes come in and I've updated our ordinance. A lot of the specific differences in the code is there's now a definition for a motor vehicle surface. So whether surface is paved or unpaved, it will now count as being, if it stores a vehicle, it will count as being a motor vehicle surface. So where this becomes important is as I get down, the state has also changed the definition of a major development. So a major development was always previously 1 acre of site disturbance or a 1/4 acre of new disturbance. They've differentiated that to now include 1/4 acre of impervious or regulated motor vehicle surface. So this would mean if someone had a gravel parking area, previously it wasn't required to meet stormwater management regulations, and now it will be forced to comply. In addition, the water quantity, quality, and recharge requirements have to be met for each sub area of a site. So I know this is very technical, but if you have a development application, each one is required to meet water quality, quantity, and recharge requirements for their overall site. This new rule will mean that if you have an area that in theory drains to a roadway and an area of the site which drains to the rear, that they need to meet these requirements now in both the rear and the front of a property. They can't use them and combine them to show that they meet that requirement. They've also updated to note that a groundwater mounding analysis is going to be required for all stormwater infiltration type structures. Previously, it was just for recharge. Now they're going to require for all what they refer to as a best management practice or a BMP structure. They're also going to require a deed notice for all stormwater management measures. And a lot of this has to do with continued maintenance of these facilities. They've also provided some green infrastructure guidance. This is what we previously looked at more, or what was referred to as a non-structural stormwater measure, but they now quantify green levels of the infrastructure. They assign it minimum or maximum drainage areas, which can contribute to that, and they speak to the water quality that each of those BMPs can achieve. So the other thing I was able to do in incorporating, again, the DEP model, it also states that a municipality can enhance those standards or provide higher requirements. It should be noted that these can only be applicable to commercial development applications. And that's because residential are subject to the RSIS. The RS is going to refer them to the DEP code. So the only way if we did enhancements that they would apply would be for commercial development. And I had the opportunity to meet with the Green Team, who also had a presentation by the Watershed Institute to offer some of their concerns and comments. Those included revising a major development definition to be a 1/2 acre of disturbance. As I indicated previously, DEP requirements say if you have an acre of disturbance or a 1/4 acre of regulated or now this motor vehicle surface course or impervious coverage. So that's something the city can consider. The other thing is maybe instead of that quarter acre of impervious coverage, reducing that to be 5,000 square feet. So roughly a quarter acre is 10,890 square feet. If we reduced it to 5,000, we'd be under that threshold. And again, applicable only to commercial. The other thing was requiring on-site retention of stormwater to promote store 95%. Define a minor development, so suggestions maybe of 250 square feet or more. The more I thought about this, I initially thought it was a great idea, but again, because it's not applicable to residential development, I don't think we see minor development on commercial sites where this would be a trigger, but it is something the city could consider. In addition, there was a recommendation to not include the definition of a motor vehicle surface and just require that all impervious surface up to and including gravel must be considered an impervious surface. And the reason why there's a distinction there is the water quality standards only going to apply to a motor vehicle surface. So if I can give an example, if we had a parking garage and we had 2 tiers, the roof level is going to have to be required to be treated for water quality, but the area underneath that that's covered by the roof would not have to be counted towards the water quality standard because it's covered in theory by that roof area. They also recommended incorporating stormwater standards in redevelopment projects. And I think that's something as we adopt redevelopment plans can easily be incorporated. They could also be noted to be subject to the stormwater control ordinance of the city. A lot of times what happens with redevelopment is the site was already developed. So they don't look at the change that occurs when you demolish and then reconstruct. So that's why that was a suggestion. Also to keep the non-structural standards. And again, the more I had dove into this, a lot of those non-structural standards are now incorporated in that green infrastructure requirement. So I do believe the DEP model code does incorporate that. And then to include the stormwater section within the zoning section of the code. Again, that's something that, you know, the council can review. It is codified in our ordinance. It is applicable to any major developments or any major subdivisions or site plans. This ordinance that would be before you ultimately will need to be reviewed by the county. Our time frame to approve this is the first week in March of 2021. So I kind of had put together a schedule. We did send just the DEP model draft to the county. We don't have to have approval from the county prior to March, but they would at least like the opportunity to review the complete draft that incorporates all city comments in advance of any introduction. So my recommendation would be we review the model ordinance. I'm happy to answer any questions or comments that the council may have, and that we look to submit a draft to the county, formally get their comments, have an introduction to City Council at the February 10th, I believe. I don't know if our calendar's set, but just looking off typical dates for introduction. It would then be referred to the Planning Board for consistency at their February meeting, and then would be on for second reading and adoption at the second council meeting in February. And this would have the ordinance fully adopted ahead of the deadline of March of 2021. So I realize I kind of was very general, and a lot of this is very technical, but I'm happy to circulate the draft ordinance, which highlights the changes specifically. It'll walk us through our existing Section 300, and I've highlighted where this is changed. And again, the changes that I have highlighted are those that the DEP has incorporated in their model ordinance. So it is consistent with what the DEP is asking municipalities to adopt. So with that, Council President, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have, or certainly any comments.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Does anybody have any questions for Laura?
I just wanted to know if we can get a copy of that, Laura, and can you also include the Green Team recommendations as well in the draft so we know what they were asking for specifically?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Laura, does this comply most of the stuff with the watershed is asking for?
So the watershed offered the enhancement. So those were the additional things that the city can consider, which were making a major development, reducing it from 1 acre of disturbance to ½ acre of disturbance, considering reducing the impervious coverage from a 1/4 acre to
Have-
5,000 square feet. On-site retention of 95% of stormwater runoff, defining a minor development, also
Okay.
not incorporating the DEP recommended definition of a motor vehicle surface and just incorporating that within all impervious surfaces, incorporating stormwater standards and redevelopment projects, the non-structural standards and the zoning section, incorporating this in the zoning section of the code. And as I kind of had commented, I believe the stormwater standards and redevelopment projects would be incorporated in the associated redevelopment plan. So I do think we would comply with that. The non-structural standards of the low impact design, it is noted in our ordinance, and I can highlight that more specifically, but I believe that this is covered in the new ordinance by the green infrastructure standards. So really it would be whether the council wanted to reduce and change the definition to make it stricter on a major development. Also increasing the requirement of the on-site retention, and whether or not you wanted to define a minor development and exclude the definition of a motor vehicle surface.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, Laura, an excellent report as always. From a non-technical perspective, if you had to talk to the general public and say why this is good and how this is going to benefit Long Branch, what are like 3 or 4 non-technical benefits, bullet points that the general public can understand?
I think the incorporation of any place a vehicle parks now being considered as an impervious surface is a big difference, because you have a lot of places which could use parking on gravel, and previously that would have been able to be excluded because it's considered a pervious surface. So I think that is important, because now it changes the drainage area that an engineer would be required to detain. I think the incorporation of the green infrastructure details is very important. It talks about different types of green infrastructure, and I think that that's important to incorporate as people try to get more progressive with their designs. And I also think the deed notice for the stormwater management measures. So that's important, so that we know if you buy a property, you may be responsible for the maintenance of a rain garden, and you understand what that entails. It provides a recording device and a mechanism for us to ensure that all owners understand what the stormwater management strategy is for the site and how it has to be maintained.
So one last question. Will this help with our areas that always get flooded?
Well, it's an effort to help. A lot of what we see in Long Branch has to do with tidal impacts. So we have rainwater that falls in the sky, it goes into our storm system, but we have some tidal impacts there. So certainly any additional measures, the green infrastructure, looking at incorporating more things on site. I do think the requirement that you now have to look at your entire drainage area and where it contributes flow will assist the city, because we could have a site which drastically maybe reduces flows to the roadway, but increases runoff to the rear of their property. But because that overall site may have met the standard, it was never flagged previously. So I do think it's important that now we know at any point, any analysis point, that runoff is going to exit a site, it's going to have to meet the standard for quality, quantity, and recharge. And just so the council's aware, like when I say that, there's requirements for reductions. So your stormwater leaving your site has to be, for example, for a 10-year storm event, 50% of what it is in the existing state, 75% for the 2-year storm is 50%, 10-year is 75%, and the 100-year storm is 80%. So those rates have to be reduced. This would require that a site have to look at that in all analysis points that it contributes to.
Okay. Okay, Laura, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Hi, Bill.
Hey,
Hello,
Bill.
how's
Welcome.
everyone doing?
Hi, Bill.
All right, the next, we're gonna go with, review the discussion council meeting dates for 2021, city council. Mary, you got those dates, or you want me to
I
bring them up?
do, sir, I do. So your council meetings are held the second and fourth Wednesday of every month. So January through August, there are no, I guess, holidays such to consider. Come September, Rosh Hashanah ends Wednesday, the 8th. So would you like to have your council meeting on the 9th, which is that Thursday? Does that work for everyone?
I'm okay with that. How about everybody else?
I'm fine.
It's okay with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then the next, there's nothing in October. November, the League of Municipalities, this will not interfere with your schedules for 2021. But there is another holiday, Thanksgiving. So would you like to have your meeting, let's say the Tuesday, the 23rd?
Yeah, that sounds good. Same as we're having right now.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay,
Yep.
Okay,
and you're all done.
That was it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
You're
So the
welcome.
resolution will be on next week,
That
next
is
meeting,
correct.
Mary?
Yes.
Thanks.
All right, review the regular meeting agenda. Does anybody have any questions?
I had one question. Where did I write it's 2320. And it just has to do with the cabanas and the lockers, all that. And the way I read it, where we still have the requirement that people have to show up in person to purchase these things. I thought that was something that we were going to try to change.
George, go ahead.
no, I know I definitely brought it up because I went out there last year, March or whenever it was. I went out there and suggested that we do something different. I was told that we would work on it. Even though we've done it for years, I just think it's, the people have nowhere to use the bathroom, stuff like that, and we shouldn't just have our residents sitting out there, all night for 3 or 4 days.
Right, I agree.
I think part of the issue is it's hard they sell out every year. And it's hard to determine, on the first come, first served basis, if you're not physically in line. I mean, to do it, I don't know if there's a computerized way to do it, or, if you do it by mail, that's really not an efficient way of first come, first serve. At this point, I'm not aware of any alternative process.
We could.
What was did we discuss a lottery at some point? Was that ruled out for some reason?
I was not involved in the lottery discussion.
George, do you remember anything like that? I mean, or Billy, was that brought up at all?
I don't know if it was a lottery, Mayor, but I know it was brought up that we, open it up, let's say 12:01 on April 1st. And you must have, the money immediately. Like if you don't have it, you can't just hold the space until, 2 or 3 days later. That was suggested. But the way we're doing it now, it's just not good. But I've heard nothing else other than that. That's the only suggestion that I heard and brought.
The lottery might be a good idea.
Well, I know that my understanding is repeat customers, they get priority. Is that correct, Mike? Right?
They get to renew.
Okay, they get to renew, and then it's the folks after that. And,
Right.
We have a number of things that we discussed. The mayor's been spearheading this group discussion on items that were problematic this year. This is one that slipped through the crack. It didn't make our list. So we haven't had a chance to really discuss it at great length. But I think no matter what scenario we come up with, it's going to adversely affect someone and their preferences.
Well, the adversely affecting someone because, a few people may have a system where they pay people to to sit out there, and that's fine. That's their little hustle to make a couple bucks. But again, still to have, whether they are residents or they're from out of town, just, trying to make a buck. They're bringing recliners out there, TVs out there, heaters out there. Last year, the Bucky James turned the electric off, so they couldn't use the TV or the electric heaters. So even if we did the lottery, it's still better than to have human beings sitting and waiting. And again, there are no bathroom facilities or anything like that. I just don't think that's a good look.
Well, George, we can hold this off and relook at it, right? Is there any urgency to this right now?
No, it came from Stan Zuba, I believe. Is that
Why don't
okay,
we-
Mary? I mean, I wasn't part of putting that resolution together. I think the important part was renewing our fees. I don't know that
But Mike, we're looking at March, sometime in March to do this. I mean, if we reviewed this or took another look at it, if we did it in the first meeting in December or second, would that make any difference?
I don't think it makes a difference, no.
Okay. But why don't we get together with a group and see what you want to do?
Sure.
So why don't we remove 23-20? I'm sorry,
230-20.
230-20.
230-20, yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I agree. And, can we get an idea? I mean, how do other sort of municipalities deal with it? It just seems, archaic at this point, when there's so much technology, available, that we say to people, come and stand online and, to get this cabana or whatever.
It sounds like the lottery might do just that, though.
All right, why don't we're going to remove that 230-20 and for further discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. I need a motion to close.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I need a motion to adopt a resolution to go into executive session for the following items: attorney-client privilege, public safety, COVID-19 updates, George Jackson, contract negotiations, 2021 non-union salary ordinance, George Jackson, Oceanfront Broadway redevelopment plan, Louis Raynon and Nicholas Graviano, shared service agreement, SPCA George Jackson, Seaview Towers, Mayor Pallone, Transit Village, Mayor Pallone.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Dangler,
Here.
Dr. Vogt,
Here?
Mrs. Wittes,
Yes.
Dr. Selly,
Yes.
and Mr. Viera.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Pucci, we're going into executive session, so if you could exit the room, you can come back at 7:30 for the regular meeting.